Hey, what's up guys? It's LDJ Writes here again, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things about writing, really, and it's about creating compelling characters. Characters are arguably the most important part of any story. I mean, if you've got bad characters, no one's really going to want to read your story. It doesn't matter how good your plot is, doesn't matter what kind of words you created, doesn't matter if you've made the next Hogwarts or the next Camp Half-Blood. If you don't have Percy Jackson or Harry Potter in your novel, people are not going to care. So yeah, today I'm going to be getting into my process for creating characters, which really rests on four pillars. It's kind of four main things that I think about when I'm coming up with a new character, whether it's a major character or even a minor character, because your minor characters are important too. So yeah, let's get into my process for creating compelling characters. Alright, so if you've been keeping up with my Camp NaNoWriMo vlog series, you will know that I am working on a mystery thriller novel that I am calling Court of Rooks. And while I was thinking about how I wanted to do this video and how I wanted to show you guys how I make characters, I realized that I don't have any character sheets for any character in this book, which is really unusual for me because I have tons of character sheets, I have a ton of character graphics with all their information and stuff on them, but I didn't have any for this book. And recently I have kind of gotten obsessed with this software called OBSIDIAN, which is it's mainly a note-taking app, but it's really good for compiling all your information and notes for world building. So I've been copying all my stuff from my Google Drive to my Obsidian vault. In the process of doing that, I was updating all my character sheets for characters from my other books and series. For today's video, I'm going to be kind of doing a walkthrough of a brand new character sheet for my main character, Dominic Alter, who is a detective. I think using him as my example for this video is perfect because I'm talking about making compelling characters, and Dominic is he's probably the most complex and interesting main character that I've ever written about. And he's really challenging, and I just think that his personality traits and his character archetype and all the other things that go into what makes him him is really interesting, and I think he'll be a good case study on how to make a compelling character. Let's get into how I brainstorm my characters. So one of the first things I consider when making a brand new character is their general information, which usually includes their physical appearance, their birthday, where they're from, what's their job, social class, random quirks and habits, just things like that. So in my template, I've got it broken down into physical information and then just additional information, which has some of the things that I just listed. Also, my template, as you guys can see, it's pretty bare, and they're usually not too extensive. And I do that on purpose because I feel like if you jot down every little thing about your character, you kind of lose the essence of creativity, especially when you're doing this process before you even start writing your book. For me, I'm already 10 chapters deep into my first draft, so I've kind of come up with stuff as I'm writing, which is why I have limited character sheets. And you see, I started this book and I didn't even have one. So I don't think you guys should get hung up on every little detail about your character, but knowing important physical traits, like do they have a scar, or are their eyes a certain color if you're writing fantasy, because every fantasy story has that one character with odd colored eyes. I'm even guilty of this, but giving your character a distinct trait that sets them apart from other characters can be really helpful to characterize them and just add a little uniqueness to them. And also, keeping track of their physical attributes can help keep them consistent when you're describing them throughout your story. I don't often describe my characters, at least my main character, because I write in third person, which would give me the, platform to describe my character often, but I feel like it's not really needed, so I don't do it often. But when I do, I want to make sure that I'm keeping it consistent. If my character has a mole on the left side of his face, I don't want to get 20 chapters deep and accidentally say the mole's on his right side of his face, or just stuff like that. So you want to take note of the physical information. You want to take note of, their job, if they're an adult, or what they do on a day-to-day basis, because you also need to know your character in who they are before your story even starts, which that will lead into another one of my pillars for creating compelling characters. But for this part, for the physical information, what I do to brainstorm how I want my character to look is generally just like scroll through Pinterest and look at pictures. Most of the time I kind of have an image of the character in my head already, so then I'll just try to find pictures that reaffirm how I want them to look. So for example, Dominic is inspired by Luther, Idris Elba from the British TV show Luther. So I really wanted him to look kind of just like Luther. Obviously he doesn't look exactly like him, but I did have a picture generated that looks pretty much exactly how I imagine him. So yeah. Another thing I do for my other characters in visualizing them is I use this site called Artbreeder, which helps you make a face for your character, and I'll probably throw up a little image of what that looks like and how you can do that. If you guys want a tutorial on how to actually make faces on Artbreeder, let me know and I will make that video. And Anu also has a really cool video on how to do that as well, and you guys can check that out. But if you guys want to see me and how I do that, let me know and I'll make that video. But yeah, I just find some images on Pinterest on how I want my character to look, how I want them to dress, you know, a general vibe. I'll make a mood board in Photoshop, or you can do it in Canva. That's pretty easy. And yeah, that's pretty much how I attack the physical attribute side of creating my characters. So I was going to get into character personality and archetype next, but I kind of feel like while that is important, I think considering your character's wants and needs and their internal desires is a lot more important than their personality. And those things can even like directly influence their personality and how they act. So I think I'm going to talk about that part next. So yeah, pillar 2 of my character creation process and making well-rounded and complex characters is to like establish what their want and their need is. And if you don't really know what I'm talking about, a character's want is something that like, it's like something they're aspiring to do. It's like their goal in the story. For example, in like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang's want is to learn how to control all 4 elements and defeat the Fire Lord. But that's not the same as his need, which is... What is Aang's need? Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure Aang's need was he needs to grow up and, you know, let go of his trauma with the Air Temple and to fully accept his role as the Avatar, as he was just a little kid and he has to grow up quickly and assume his role as the Avatar, which then helps him on his journey to learning how to bend all the elements and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what Aang's need is. I'm rambling, but the need is more of an internal battle or struggle or something that your character needs to find within themselves, while the want is more external and is like a physical action they can take, or it's, you know, it's the quest, or they're going to find something, or they're going to do something, while the need is more cerebral. It happens in their head. Maybe it happens after like a vital event in the story, or they have an internal battle with themselves and they come out on the other side differently, or they realize that I've been going after this thing and I actually needed to do this thing within myself to achieve my goal. Or even sometimes the need is the exact opposite of the want. So yeah, when thinking about your characters, you really want to consider those 2 things, and once you have those nailed down, it'll make characterizing your character and like conceptualizing them that much easier. For example, in my story Court of Rooks, Dominic's major want is to solve the case of the Grandmaster case, who is a serial killer who has been going around his city of Black River killing high profile criminals and kind of just, you know, going on a rampage of vigilante justice, which isn't okay for multiple reasons, but it like causes inner conflict with Dominic because he is one of these corrupted individuals that the Grandmaster is trying to kill, but he's also a detective who sees that he's in the middle of it all. But on the other hand, his need has nothing to do with the case. His need is actually that he needs to search within himself and be able to forgive himself for all the mistakes and the crimes he's committed while he's supposed to be, you know, a servant to the people. So yeah, that's something he has to grapple with. He has to, on one hand, he wants to solve this case and to keep his city safe and get this serial killer off the streets who is actually targeting him as well. But on the other hand, his need is he needs to forgive himself and let go of his trauma and forgive himself for what he has done in his past. So yeah, that's kind of how you can think about the want and the need. I'm not sure if that's helpful. I kind of felt like I was rambling a lot on that because it's a really like high concept thing in my opinion, the want and the need, because it's like you really got to think about like who your character is on a fundamental level when it comes to this part. It's not like physical attributes like my character is this tall and his eyes are this color. Like when it comes to the want and the need, it's almost like a psychological level. And that leads into the next pillar of my character creation process, which is character archetype and personality. So I use character archetypes as a starting point for my characters. But if you want to make your characters feel like real people and so that they can jump off the page to your readers, we're going to have to go a little deeper than the archetype. Now, when I say archetype, it's very important to not confuse that with stereotype, which is the way I differentiate the two is that a stereotype is more of an oversimplification of a characterization or like a singular trait, while a character archetype is more of like a framework of another trait, or it's more of an in-depth stereotype in my opinion. So of course you can expound upon a stereotype and make it more in-depth, but I feel like when you do that, it then turns into an archetype. And I found this article from Masterclass Writing 101, and there are 12 literary archetypes that are generally found throughout fiction. Of course, there's probably some that this list does not have, and there's probably some that you can combine or you can think of some others, but there's generally 12, and I pretty much agree with all the things on here. Like I subconsciously draw from this list when creating my characters. I never knew this article existed before making this video, but yeah, there's about 12 different archetypes that you can pull from and use those as a baseline for your character. But it's important to kind of add things that allow them to deviate from the archetype so they're not one note, because even though I think archetypes are better than stereotypes, it can still result in having a two-dimensional character instead of a three-dimensional character, which is what you ultimately want when you're in the character creation process. So a good way to add depth to your character is to make sure that their traits align with their overall goal, going back to the want and the need that we talked about earlier. And also their traits should open up the door for inner conflict within themselves. I'll use an example of my character. My character Dominic is, if we're looking at the archetype he's a mixture of the hero and the outlaw. And those two archetypes alone create lots of internal strife for this character, because on one hand, he's a detective and wants to be the hero for his city. And then on the other hand, he is kind of a morally corrupt character, not fully by choice, but it's something that has just happened to him. So there's almost a dichotomy of man there, where on one hand, he knows he's supposed to be this hero that his city needs him to be, but on the other hand, he's like, I've done all these bad things and I don't know if I'm the right person to save the city. So that's a good way of adding some depth, not death, but that's a good way to add depth to your character. Just give them like something to struggle with internally. Like the struggles should not just come from outward forces and the plot themselves. Like your character should have something within them that causes them to struggle and influences their character development. If you're struggling with like what to make your character's personality to be, or maybe you just have like one or two traits in mind, but you're not sure which direction to take it into, I would suggest taking a personality test in the point of view of your character. One of the more popular ones that I've seen writers use for this tactic is the Myers-Briggs personality test. So basically what you would do is you would just answer all the questions how you think your character would answer them, and then once you're done, it'll give you like a code that lines up with the character's personality. It'll be like INTJ-P or something. It'll tell you what all that means. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but you can read the explanation for what that character's personality will be, and then you can use that to like inform your decisions on how to write them, how they'll react in certain situations, what's going on in their head most of the time. So that's a good way to characterize your character if you're struggling with that bit. And another thing I like to do to add depth to my characters and to inform their personality is to give them a fatal flaw or just like one glaring negative characteristic. I think this is important so that your characters don't feel like cookie cutter or too perfect, or just no one likes a character who doesn't have like an edge to them, or that they only seem to have positive qualities. Or on the flip side, if you've got an antagonist and they're mostly negative qualities, give them the opposite of a fatal flaw. Give them like a redeemable trait. There needs to be like a balance of good and evil in them, I guess. If you guys watched my my fantasy trope ranking video, you will know what my opinion on the whole good versus evil thing is. I don't really like black and white characters or black and white worlds. I like the gray area, especially for the book that I'm writing right now. Just make sure you give your character like a negative trait, especially if they're like your point of view character. So I first heard about this concept when reading the Percy Jackson books, funnily enough. I love Rick Riordan. I love his work. And he made it a point to give all of his like demigods a fatal trait because they were heroes, but he made sure to give them all a fatal trait. And I think if I'm remembering right, Percy Jackson's was his like undying loyalty to whoever he was loyal to, which that sounds like a positive trait, but it actually created a lot of problems for him throughout the series. So for my character, Dominic, his fatal flaw is just his inability to trust other people and his inability to forgive himself for his own shortcomings, which creates lots of problems for himself throughout the story. So yeah, you want to just think about how you can add things here and there to your character to make them feel more like a real person. And another way that you can make your character feel like a real person is by giving them a backstory. Now, your character was not born yesterday. You want to give your characters a life before we are introduced to them in your story. And by doing this, it makes your character feel more real. Like, it's helpful if they have a job or they have things that are going on in their life before the story starts. You don't want your character to feel like they only existed from one point of the story and then to the end of the story, and then like nothing else happens from either side of the spectrum. They need to feel like a real character that the story has kind of found and is following their life, and that their life continues to go on even after the story ends. So coming up with a backstory for them, a believable backstory, one that makes sense for their character and the larger story at hand, is really important. Now, you don't need everything from their birth to their childhood to every single act planned out, because I feel like doing that does not give you a lot of creativity and wiggle room when you're actually writing your story. Because for me personally, in the story that I'm writing, I'm coming up with things about Dominic's backstory as I go, and I feel like that's a lot more fun than pre-planning out every little detail about him. Because I mean, of course you can do that and you can change it as you go, but I just feel like having gaps allows my brain to fill in those gaps with things that make sense for the story, and then I have better connections between Dominic, his backstory, and the overall narrative that I'm trying to tell. Your character will grow with the story and things will just come to you naturally. But there are things that you probably should know, like important events that have happened in their childhood. Like, did they fall into a well with a bunch of bats? Did their parents die right in front of them when they were younger? Did they turn into a vigilante and have a clown-themed villain? Wait a minute, I think I just described the Batman.
I'm Batman.
But these key events in your character's life are things that you're gonna want to consider when you are writing their backstory. For example, with my character Dominic, I made it a point to really delve into his relationship with his parents, namely his father, who he really idolized growing up. His father had a really strict moral code and almost never deviated from this code, and that really influenced the way Dominic approached life later on. And that's also why when he eventually breaks this moral code and gets someone close to him hurt, it really kind of destroys his self of being. Just coming up with key events in their life and things that have influenced them in the past, or things that have impacted them, like maybe they had an accident, or maybe they just went through a breakup, or maybe someone in their life died before the story began. Things like that can really add depth to your character and make it feel like they are a real person before your story even began. So hopefully some of this video made sense to you. That's pretty much the end of like my process for creating characters. Those are all the things I think about, all the things I do before I actually start writing and start like writing about my characters. So yeah, hopefully you guys can take away some of my tips and tricks and things that I think about and implement it into your own process. If you have something in mind that I didn't mention in this video, make sure to leave it in the comments and hopefully you can help somebody else. The last thing I think you guys should remember when creating your character, the last thing that you guys should keep in mind when creating your characters is to just have fun with it. Creating characters, in my opinion, is one of the most fun things about writing the book. Alongside world building and, you know, coming up with the plot, creating the characters is pretty fun for me. Like, I think of my characters as my kids in a way. Dang, I got a lot of kids if I think about it like that. But yeah, just make sure to have fun with it. Keep it light. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to make the perfect characters or the perfect cast. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of this video. If you guys enjoyed and if any of these tips helped you, make sure to drop a like on the video, comment down below, and subscribe for more videos. I've been LD Jones, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.